And to talk to us more about the growing refugee crisis worldwide and how the Philippines plays a role in this world issue is Bernard Kerblat from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Good morning, Mr. Kerblat.
Magandang umaga po.
Magandang umaga, and thank you for joining us this morning. First, we'd like to find out, it's becoming increasingly common to hear the words migrant and refugees being interchanged, used in public discourse or in the media. What is the difference between these two, and does it matter?
Thank you very much. A very pertinent questions. You're right to point out that too often we see the use of migrants and for refugees, refugees for migrants, two different terms. In a nutshell, a refugee is a person who, owing to persecution or fear of persecution, is compelled to flee his or her country and cross an internationally recognized border. A migrant, even driven by poverty, makes the conscious choice of migrating. So it's two different concepts here which are too often mixed, and I'm afraid that if they are mixed, there's a purpose behind it. It's to blur the issue. We need to remember that today, if people who are forcing, who are fleeing forced movement, they were lumped into one country, almost 50 million of them, they would represent the 24th most populated country in the world. That is a staggering number, and as you rightly pointed out earlier, the highest number that the world has known since the end of the Second World War.
Now, something very recent and closer to shore is that we heard last Friday that Australia and the Philippines could be negotiating a deal wherein the Philippines could be accepting, or the transfer of asylum seekers in Australia transferred to the Philippines. Can you tell us more about this possible deal?
Well, we read about these alleged talks between Australia and the Philippines in various media reports. We officially are not being appraised of this, although we maintain a very robust and constructive dialogue with Australia. So at this point in time, I'm afraid there is not much I can say. However, if this is to replicate the model which has been adopted between Australia and Cambodia a year ago, which has resulted in a transfer of 4 refugees from Nauru to Cambodia, I would certainly recall that this agreement was not free from problems, questions, and eventually reputational risk for both countries. Simply why? Because, let's put it this way, I think it is incumbent upon every single member state to uphold their international obligation under the 1951 Convention on Refugee Status. And in this case, we take note of the fact that there is a big, powerful, industrialized neighbor who, by no doubt, is confronted to a serious refugee issue, although of smaller numbers than what we witness in Europe, and has opted to push the solution to Nauru or to Manos, which is an island in Papua New Guinea, and to leave the people who are trying to seek asylum there. So that's where we are now. We have, as we speak this morning, we have human beings, including children, who undergo detention simply because they wanted to seek asylum. In all fairness, we also have to recognize that Australia is keen in stopping the smugglers from shipping people illegally into its shore. And as a result of it, we know that at least 2,600 people have died in that process, possibly more, we don't know. And that's where we agree with Australia. Now, how to solve this problem of illegal movement by sea is another question. Is it, as the media report you quoted, through sort of encouraging other states to take this responsibility on board? I don't know. I'm simply asking the question. Or are there more constructive way to humanly deal with the question that these human beings who flee war, persecution, can be dealt with?
Based on what you said, brings us to this final question, which is, as we've been hearing a lot in the news, there's a flood of refugees into Europe, mostly driven by the world's failure to stop the Syrian crisis. What do you think are the possible solutions to this crisis, and are there any new policies?
Well, the first one is that crisis reveals that we may have the European Union, but we do have a very disunited Europe. Let's agree on that. And the order of the day, I think, is upon all the concerned 27 member states to harmonize their policy quickly, to come up with a unified policy and to acknowledge the fact that the solution to this unfolding crisis does not rest with one or two or three, however generous member states such as Germany, Sweden, the Scandinavians. I think it is incumbent upon every single member of the European Union to adopt a more human and a more cohesive way. Fences do not keep refugees away. And as the Chancellor Angela Merkel recently pointed out, she said, quote, "I have lived too long behind fences." Germans know, by the result of their very tormented history post-Second World War, what it means to be a refugee. And therefore, we salute countries such as Germany, Sweden, and many others who are sort of joining into that effort. I understand consultation is underway. I understand the public opinion have managed to shape government response to this crisis, which is not over as we speak.
Well said. Thank you very much for coming in this morning, Mr. Kerblat. Thank you. Thank you, Bernard Kerblat from the UNHCR, talking to us this morning.